Hi, I'm Deb from DG Reads, and I'm here to start another video. One of the things that I really enjoy when it comes to reading is reading prompts, TBR games, readathons, anything really that helps me narrow down my many options for what to read. I was kindly gifted by some lovely friends a gumball machine to use as a TBR game, so I call it PromptBall, and I thought it would be fun to let PromptBall control my TBR for the week. So I already have one of the prompts picked out, and I decided I should start with one that I already posted on Bookstagram, and then after that we're going to pick some things and read them as I go. The idea being I pull a prompt and I read the book right away, which is meant to encourage me to pull things off of my shelves. The first book that I'm going to be reading is for the prompt to read something historical or about history. The book that I picked for that is The House on Biscayne Bay by Chanel Cleeton. This is an upcoming release coming out on April 9th, and I was gifted an ebook copy by Berkley Publishing, so thanks to them for that. I don't know a lot about this going in, and I'll have to give you more of an update once I get started reading it, but it talks about a Gothic mansion in Miami, death is stalking, and that's all I really need to know to be intrigued to pick this one up. I'll let you know how it's going once I get started. I'm checking in from the car at work to give my midway thoughts on The House on Biscayne Bay. I am enjoying it so far. So the premise of the story, we're following two different timelines. In the past timeline, we're following Anna, and her husband has brought her to Miami. It's shortly after World War I, and her husband is building this fantastic big estate, and she's not very happy about it. She doesn't want to be in Florida. She doesn't want to be dealing with just new people and being part of society there, but they start making a name for themselves. They start getting a lot of attention until something tragic happens, and the attention that they're getting is no longer favorable. There's scandal, there's questions being raised about them, and a lot that the reader doesn't yet know. And then in a later timeline, which is probably 25 years later, we're following Carmen, and she has just been through the death of her parents and is coming to Miami from Havana, and she is going to be staying with her strange sister and her brother-in-law. Her brother-in-law is in charge of all of her money until she turns 21. So basically she's pretty trapped living with them. While she's there, she realizes that there's some unanswered questions about this estate, and the reader also doesn't know how it came to be in her brother-in-law's hands, and she starts to wonder about things, and then more happens. Things get dangerous, things go wrong, and we're really kind of in the midst of a lot of intrigue right now at the halfway point. So I'm looking forward to finishing this up. And since this is a good multitasking book, I think I probably will finish it up tomorrow, and that means I get to go home tonight and pick another prompt so I know what my next read will be once I finish this up. Alright, I am home and ready to get settled in, do some reading tonight, and most importantly, pick my next prompt, because I have no patience, and therefore that has to come first. Kylie is chilling over here in front of the PromptBall machine, so maybe if I can get her to get down. Come on, good girl. I can show you the actual PromptBall, because I realized I didn't really do a good introduction this morning. So anyway, this is my PromptBall machine. It is full of not gumballs, but PromptBalls, which are taken from many various sources. So there are a couple of annual reading challenges that I follow. I'm using the prompts from around the year in 52 books, and that is a Goodreads based group where members vote in a list of 52 prompts every year. And then I'm also using the 52 Book Club list, which is another list of 52 prompts that comes out annually. So all of those are in here. I have some that were given to me by some of my followers over on Bookstagram. I have ones that I've come up with. For this particular video, I'm just going to be pulling them all week long. Anyway, we need a new prompt. So I have my little treasure chest of quarters here. And let's see what this week's prompt will be. This next prompt will be. All right. It is a book published in 2022. So that is very easy to fulfill. It probably gives me a few too many options, and I don't know right off the top of my head what I want to pick, but I will get back to you once I figure it out. I went through my Goodreads list for my owned unread shelf, and I had quite a few things I could have picked up, but since it is still Ramathon and Team Shadows does get bonus points for a black cover, I decided to go with The Bone Orchard, which is the debut novel from Sarah A. Mueller. It came out in March of 2022, and I've owned it pretty much since March of 2022. You can kind of tell the condition of the book isn't so pristine anymore, so I'm really happy to be able to be getting to a backlist title. And this one constantly catches my eye whenever I see it. That cover is just really pretty. I really don't remember a whole lot about the synopsis. It's been on my shelf so long. So I do know we're following Charm, who is the personal concubine to the Emperor. He apparently is dying, and he's come to her, and she needs to choose which of his horrible sons will inherit the empire by discovering which one has been responsible for his murder. The tagline at the end says, "Will she save an empire or save herself instead?" And it is a fantasy. Obviously, there's some mystery elements, horror elements. It talks about a garden where the trees are grown from bones and nourished by the darkest of secrets. Sounds really interesting, like a potentially really unique world. So I look forward to trying this out, and I'll let you know how it's going. It's now Tuesday evening, and I just got home from work, spending a little bit of time with Kylie before I make dinner, so I figured it was a good time to give you my final thoughts on The House on Biscayne Bay. I really wound up enjoying this book. I really liked both of our main characters, Anna and Carmen, and I really liked that even though they lived in a period of time where women didn't have a lot of rights for themselves, they both showed a lot of agency and pushed back against some of the restrictions against them. Also really liked the way the author drew some parallels between their lives as you switch back and forth between the POVs. You pick up on some of that. And the mystery elements and the sort of gothic nature of this big elaborate estate were both really well done. And I like the way that the house really played a big part in the story as well. This wound up being a 4.5 for me. I didn't quite get drawn in as much as I would have wanted to in order to give it a 5, but overall really had a good time with it. I'm not the biggest reader of historical fiction. I have been feeling a little bit burned out with it lately, but I think the past setting for this one really did work well, and I really enjoyed it. So we're starting this off with a win, and next I will be picking up The Bone Orchard. I didn't start it yet, but the idea is to probably start it either tonight or definitely by tomorrow, and I will give you some updates when I have them. I'm 45 pages into The Bone Orchard, and I'm intrigued. We're following Charm, and she is the madam at this notorious house of ill repute, which is Orchard House. Behind the house is a bone orchard where they grow bones. Those bones are then used to be put in a vat to grow flesh and become bone ghosts. And these are essentially pretty close to identical to Charm herself. They all have very similar skulls, it says. And these are the women who work in this house of ill repute. And the women are Shame, Justice, Desire, Pride, and Pain. And each of them has something, some sort of disability or something about them. Like Justice is eternally 14 years old. And one of them has incomplete hands or injured hands. And these women are not treated well in their work. But the vat that's used to grow them can also be used to repair them after they are severely injured and abused. So there is a lot in here that's disturbing for sure. Charm gets summoned to see the Emperor, which has never happened before. She's never left Orchard House. And the Emperor basically tells her one of his sons has killed him, and she's been charged with finding out who that is and getting rid of him, and then she will have her freedom. So that's basically where we're going, is she needs to figure out which of his really, really, really horrible sons has gone the furthest and actually killed their father to take the throne, is the theory. I am very interested to see where this goes from here. It's not a super fast read, but the world sounds very interesting. I do want to learn more about Charm and her origins. I am looking forward to continuing on in this, and we'll check in later. Alright, it is Wednesday morning, and I've read further into The Bone Orchard. I'm 144 pages in, which is a little over a third of the way through, and unfortunately, I'm not really gelling with it. I still think the world building elements are very cool. I think the concepts of the bone ghosts and the way that they actually share consciousness, and Charm is able to kind of put parts of herself into each of them, has a lot of really interesting ideas behind it, but the politics and the mystery elements really just aren't holding my attention. So unfortunately, I think I'm going to go ahead and DNF this one. I'm disappointed, but I'm glad I gave it a try and took something off my shelf. So that's a positive. And the other positive is it means I get to pick another new prompt. So let's do that before I have to go to work. And see what we get. And the next prompt is another easy generic prompt. This one's from the 52 Books Club, and it is a book published in 2024. So I actually do know what I want to pick for that. So give me just one moment. I'm going to be reading The Other Valley, which is by Scott Alexander Howard. I was gifted a copy of this book by Atria Books. Thank you to Atria. I have actually just barely started this one, so that's why it came to mind so quickly. And we're following 16-year-old Odile, and she is going for a coveted seat on the Concile. If she gets in, she will decide who gets to visit her town. The thing about her town is that her town is in a very interesting spot in between a mirror image town from the past on one side and from the future on the other side. So people quite naturally might want to go see the past or the future, but it's very carefully guarded. The twist to it is that Odile has actually recognized two visitors who have come in from the future, and she knows that they are the parents of one of her friends, and they're there to grieve because obviously he has died at some point in the future, and she's not allowed to know this, and she's not allowed to tell anyone. So I haven't made it very far into it, but so far I'm intrigued. I tend to really like stories that play with time, and this one's definitely doing that. So I will check in with you later. I just finished The Other Valley, which I read primarily today. It's Wednesday evening. I generally liked this. I had a few issues with it, but overall really enjoyed it. This is one of those books where the concept and the world building take a lot of the focus. I would also say it's somewhat character driven. There's not a ton of plot. There is plot to it. The fact that our main character Odile sees the parents of a boy she knows and is coming to like, and that of course must mean that something happened. There's a reason for them to come visit and to come see him. That really spurs her into her future and what decisions she makes. The concepts in here are really interesting. So each town, there's more than just 3 towns. There's probably an infinite number of towns. But if you head one direction, you would hit a town that's 20 years in the past. And if you have the other direction, you would hit a town that's 20 years in the future. And then if you were to go past that town, it would be another 20 years and so on. So everything's in 20-year increments, which makes an interesting discussion. When you hit your 20th birthday, you know that the next you has just been born, type of thing. The discussions of what happens if you make changes leads into why they have this super regimented border system and why visitations are so rare and so much thought is put into whether someone can be allowed to visit or not. And we get to follow along with some other people's decisions, with our main character's decisions in her pursuit of a career. And it was really interesting. I think the author did really well at managing some of the issues that tend to come up when you deal with things like time travel. The pacing sometimes wasn't 100% my favorite. There were some places where I felt like it got a little slow. For anyone who's worried about that type of thing, there aren't any quotation marks in here. I know that does bother a lot of people. I did the bulk of the book on audio. I wound up picking that up from the library. So in that case, punctuation or not really doesn't matter. But I think this one's going to wind up getting a 4-star for me. I haven't actually sat down and fully processed it as I just finished, and wanted to go ahead and give an update while I am sitting here acting as a Kylie bed. So this means that I get to go pick my next prompt. I'm hoping to get 1 or 2 more in before the end of the week. I will be back shortly with another prompt. Okay, that took a little longer than I meant it to take because I realized I was out of quarters. So I had to disassemble, remove quarters, and realized that my little treasure chest of quarters is a little bit overfull when they're all in here. So guess that means I need to pick a prompt. So let's see what we got. We have a randomized page count. That's really hard to read, I'm sure. So I need a randomized page number, and then let's say maybe plus or minus 25, whatever number I wind up with. And I'm not going to be too cruel to myself because it's the end of the month and because I don't want to take too long to read something. And I am in the middle of two very chunky books in addition to the books I'm reading for this project. Well, let's just do it. Alexa, give me a random number between 200 and 450.
A random number between 200 and 450 and 555 is 220.
Okay, 220. I don't know where she came up with the extra number there, but 220. That's very small. So definitely should be doable. That was a lot easier than I expected because I found Anybody Home by Michael J. Seidlinger. And this one came in a Nightworms subscription delivery. And I don't know a whole lot about it, but it is exactly 220 pages. So that's all I need to know to put this on the TBR. It says that the main character is a seasoned invader with multiple home invasions under their belt, and they're recounting their dark victories while offering tutelage to a new generation of ambitious home invaders eager to make their mark. It sounds like an interesting one. It looks like there's a little bit of a mixed media type format to it, so it hopefully will be a pretty quick read. This is one that's been on my shelf for a little while that I've been wanting to get to. For Realmathon, it'll definitely work for a black cover. And training in home invasion is kind of like school, right? Anyway, that's what we're reading next, and I'll let you know once I get into it. I'm out and about for work today. I had a training to attend. I have a couple online meetings, and then I have to go into the office, but I stopped at home briefly in between to say hi to Kylie, and I figured I would give an update on Anybody Home. I made it about 33% in, I think. My Hoopla app apparently really likes the book because even after I switched to a Libby book to drive around today, Hoopla kept listening, so it finished the book. So I need to find where I actually left off. But anyway, initial thoughts on this one. It's written in second person, and we're in the head of a criminal mastermind, so it's giving me a lot of You by Carolyn Kepnes vibes, but this is definitely different. The You in this case isn't the victims, but it's the people that our mastermind is training how to stalk people and invade their homes and all of that. So it's an interesting perspective. I'm not 100% sure exactly where it's headed. Don't have a ton of thoughts on it yet, but definitely interested to keep going, and I'll let you know how it winds up. TGIF, I am ready for the weekend. I was really exhausted last night after a really busy workday, so I have not finished Anybody Home yet. This one I'm 70% into, so I'll save my final thoughts until I actually finish and update you later. So I am going to pull my next prompt. I've decided I can fit one more in, and let's see what we get. And this one, apparently it's the week of publishing dates, because this one says published in 2019, so go on a bit more backlist, which I have no idea off the top of my head what I'm going to wind up with, but let me figure it out. Goodreads sort by publication date is really buggy. Let's just say that. But I did find something on my shelf from 2019, and that is The Future of Another Timeline by Annalee Newitz. And this one is a relatively new addition to my shelf, actually, and not one that I know a whole lot about. I think I got it in a book box. 1992, we've got Beth, who has a confrontation at a Riot Grrrl concert and then winds up in a car with her friend's abusive boyfriend dead in the back seat, agreeing to hide his body. And then in 2022, Tess has dedicated her life to visiting key moments in history through time travel and trying to change things for the better. And somehow their lives are going to intertwine. and war is breaking out across the timelines. Sounds like a really interesting read. A good one to pick up. My library does have the audiobook, so I can probably start it today, maybe on my drive home, and finish it up this weekend. So anyway, that gets me going for the day, and I'll check in later. It is Friday evening, and I'm home and very happy to be home. And Kylie's been crazy in the background. You done now? Okay, let's use this moment of quiet, potential quiet, I should say, to do a final wrap up on Anybody Home. I finished this up at work today, and overall I enjoyed it. It's not a book that necessarily I would say I love. I don't know that I would recommend it to a ton of people, but if you are interested in something a little unique, if you do kind of want to be creeped out a little bit and disturbed, definitely, this is one you might want to try. There are definitely trigger warnings. There's a dog in the book. You know pretty early on things aren't going to go very well for the dog, and they really, really don't. There's children involved as well. If anything along those lines might be disturbing, this definitely will be disturbing. But I did find it a unique way to tell a story. The fact that kind of our narrator is training these people. It's like he's directing a movie. It's all presented as if it's being done for the sake of entertainment and how to line up shots. In the end, the uniqueness of the format and the way of telling the story definitely got some bonus points for me. And the audio was a good way to go with this, I think, with the narrative style as well. So it winds up at a 3.5 from me, and it was definitely an interesting experience, and I'm glad that the random page count worked for me to pick this one up. It is a rainy Saturday, and I am pretty much spending the day wrapped up in blankets on the couch with the puppy, who is currently wanting to play fetch. So I'm going to make this quick. I came in for my midway thoughts on the future of another timeline, and it's different than I expected. I don't know exactly what I expected, but it's been a little bit confusing between the timelines, which isn't entirely unusual with a time travel type book, but it hits some pretty hard topics. A lot of the focus is on women's rights, on feminism, and I do appreciate that. I think some of the takes and the ways that time travel is used is interesting. There are some parts that have been hard to read. In terms of trigger warnings, there is a fairly graphic on-page abortion with a doctor who is not a good doctor, and that was very uncomfortable to read. I think some of the complications of time travel and the way the main characters are interacting with the time stream have some really interesting stuff to explore. I'm about 45% of the way through. I've been listening to the audiobook quite a bit for this one as I was getting a few things done, and the audiobook is good. It does occasionally have some music. As I think I had mentioned, the book starts with a concert, and every once in a while that comes in, and it's a little bit of a jump scare. It comes kind of out of nowhere, and I wasn't expecting it, and it gets loud. So there is that, but in general, I've been enjoying it. I'm looking forward to seeing where this winds up and how it manages to resolve, because I'm not sure exactly what direction it's going to take. So I look forward to finding out. Now you can play fetch. All right, it is Saturday evening, and I'm here to wrap up my thoughts on the future of another timeline. I don't have a ton more thoughts than the last time I updated. I enjoyed this overall. I think it was just a little bit different than I expected. I expected it to be more about the plot and action, and there was some of that certainly going on. But I think a lot of it really was trying to drive home messages, and that's not exactly what I was looking for in the moment. They're important messages, absolutely. The idea of women's rights and reproductive rights, accepting all gender identities, and all of that is very important. And I think the author did really well talking about those issues. The author kind of ends in the author's notes saying that they grew up in a world where they remember women having rights, and they hope that readers will have those rights as well. This being written in 2019, still very important today. Rights are constantly being questioned. A lot of really important messages. I think some of the character ideas in here got a little bit lost. There were some great reveals, but some of that I think lost some impact just in the heavy nature of the discussions happening. But overall, I enjoyed it. This was another 3.5 for me. So we started the week on a really good win. Then I had a DNF, and then I've had some good reads that I've enjoyed, but not really finding the brilliant 5 stars that I was looking for overall. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed following along with me, playing my PromptBall game this week and reading some great books. I will still be pulling prompts regularly over on my Bookstagram, so be sure to check me out over there as well. If you enjoy seeing these, I do share them in my stories as they come up. But I would very much enjoy doing this again, dedicating a week where I make sure to read 4 or 5 in a row, try to find something pretty spur of the moment. I do promise that there are prompts in there that aren't just what year a book was published. We wound up with a really time-centered week with several prompts that had to do with what year things were published, one being about history, and 2 of the books even were about time travel. It was an unintended theme. If you have ideas for other prompts for me to add in, I definitely am always looking to add new things. Please leave them down below in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video here. I really appreciate you being here. Please hit that like button, leave me a comment below, subscribe if you're interested in seeing more of PromptBall or more of the books that I read, and I will catch you in the next video.